Right, morning everybody. So another game has come to an end in the Hamble Chess Box, the 7-day games that we're analysing with the computers, and this one's going to take some analysis. It's ended in a draw, as you can see there. So it's the first one we haven't won, and I think it's safe to say this was a get out of jail situation because 59% accuracy. Now I'm normally floating around the 90 to 92 mark, so 59 is a bit of a disaster. Whoops. And our opponent was 83, which is good, but you know it's not perfect. Lots of mistakes. Probably my guess is that most of them came in the end game when we were just down to rooks and pawns in this. So yeah, well, I guess we better see what happens. So I've got the white pieces. So let's put the analysis on. And I've started with d4 as usual. g6, so fine. Modern defense from our opponent. Knight f3 is fine. Bishop g7 is fine. As you'd expect, typical opening, slight advantage to white. That's what you'd normally expect. e3 is my way of doing things. I often do that. Just block this bishop in and bring it out that way. It's I do it frequently. Sometimes I'll play the bishop here first or here. This is just a setup I like, often with a triangle of pawns in the board, in the middle of the board. Anyway, d6, so typical, so modern defense from black. Bishop c4, fine. So pointing at that weak square. Not that I can do a lot with it in a minute, but why not? There's not a lot of point of putting the bishop here because it just eats granite. If you put the bishop here, it's just biting against a pawn that's protected by its mate. So you tend, once this setup's come up, to put the bishop here or here so that it's not biting there. I mean, you can put it there, it's fine, but it's just, it's difficult to break through with it. Anyway, whatever. Knight f6 is best. h3, I don't know. I mean, I'm just stopping the look what it wants me to do. It wants me to put the bishop back. So I played the pawn here just to stop the black bishop coming here. Just because I want it to not have any squares, really. So I've played pawn there. Well, fine. It's not a bad move, is it? But it just means level position. The computer weirdly wanted me to put the bishop back, which is silly because it means I'd have moved the bishop twice. So it does suggest that maybe I should have just put it there in the first place on the previous move and not wasted a move. Yeah, whatever. Castles is fine, or c5 is a typical modern defense break to try and attack my center. Fine. Castles is obviously fine. Nothing to report at the minute, still basically level. b6, so is going to bring the bishop out this way to point it at my king, which is perfectly reasonable. So double fianchetto. This is called fianchettoing the bishop, by the way. I think it's the Italian for window. Knight bd2 is okay. It still wanted me to put the bishop back to e2. I can't for the life of me understand why. But anyway, bishop b7, c3. There's my little triangle of pawns. So you'll often find there's an opening called the Trompovsky, and you can do it in the Torre attack too. Where this bishop comes out. No, it doesn't. Where it comes out here really early, just swaps itself for a knight. And then white just puts all their pawns or loads of their pawns on black squares to make up for not having a black square bishop. It's quite playable. Anyway, there's my nice triangle. Knight bd7, fine. Rook e1 is fine. e5 is fine. And all this is changing slightly, but it's still basically saying level. e4 is best. I can't be allowing that pawn to come forward that way, so I'm going to take that square myself. h6 is fine. I'm not quite sure why he's doing it. I guess he doesn't want my knight going here, and then knight takes, bishop takes, and we lose bishop and knight for rook and pawn. I guess he doesn't want that. So queen e2, it wanted me to swap as a better move. So takes, yeah, so we'd have ended up with a very level looking structure. So pawn takes, probably knight takes, pawn takes. I don't know, it's pretty level. I mean, you'd have symmetrical pawn formations, four each on one side, 3 each on the other, but okay. So I queen e2'd. Rook e8, so he's putting it on the same line as my queen, and the reason I played queen e2 was simply to get rid of this bishop, by the way. It's annoying. It's pressuring my e4 square, and I just want it off the board. So that's what I was up to. Queen c8, get rid of it, get rid of it. So, okay, well, I've achieved my plan, and the computer thinks black's about half a pawn ahead, so nothing dramatic to report. And now d5. So I haven't got a white square bishop. So I start thinking about fixing pawns on white squares. You remember what I said earlier about if you trade off this one, you can try fixing pawns on black squares. Well, the same applies in reverse. So if I fix all my pawns on white squares, his pawns will all be on black squares, and then hopefully he'll have a bad bishop. Well, that was my logic anyhow. So knight h5, and obviously this square is a bit of a weakness for me. So g3, I'm going to protect that square. It says knight b1 was better. I mean, I mean, a human being just isn't playing knight b1. It's just undefending your own knight is ridiculous. If it said to play the knight to f1, I could understand it because that would open the bishop up to that square. But no human being would play knight b1. It just looks ridiculous. An obvious computer move. You just wouldn't do it. G3, so I've protected that square, and the computer's saying dead level. Absolutely, couldn't be any leveler, 0.00. C6 is best, so he doesn't want me having pawns on the white squares in the middle of the board. He wants to break up this wedge. Knight c4, so I spotted that when this pawn moved, it undefended this one, and now if this is my knight, I've got a fork. And our opponent defends that square with the bishop. Could have done it with the queen, but either's good. And I think well, the thing is, I thought at the time it let me win a pawn with this tactic. Bishop takes h6 is best. And then there's a mistake. So now I'm going to get a slight advantage. Now it thinks it should have been. Now let's go back and say what the computer thinks that black should play bishop takes, and let me get my knight fork in. Queen to c7. Knight takes rook, rook takes knight. Queen to c4 would be my best move. Knight to b8, again, I'm stunned. I don't think a human would play it, but maybe. b5, sorry, knight f6, rook a d1, just looking at what could have happened. And yeah, let's just see. So we'd have had 1, 2, 3 minor pieces against 1, but I'm a rook up. So you'd have been looking at a pretty level looking position. But anyway, this isn't what happened. I played bishop takes, and my opponent played c takes d5, and I played bishop takes f8, which is the best move, and it should leave me a pawn and a bit ahead. Rook takes is best. E takes d5 is best. I spent quite a lot of time in the recording trying to work out if I should take that first, but it looks like I made the right choice. Queen c7 is best. Knight e3 is okay. Now the computer's saying I should have played the knight to g5 here as my next move. There you go, you can see it. I guess because I guess because I can then relocate here, and then both the two knights are hitting that square, and it's really quite tricky actually to see how black can defend that. That would be my guess as to what's going on there. But knight g5 is what it wants me to do. Centralize the rooks. Okay, well, that's not where we were. Queen to c7 was played, and I played knight e3. Not a bad move, but reduces my advantage. Queen to c5, it says, is inaccurate. It wanted the knight to go to c5. So at this point, advantage to me, although I do remember when we were playing the game not being completely convinced, because I could see horrible things coming this way on the opposite side of the board. So rook a c1 is okay, nothing wrong with that. It wanted me to play h4. Again, I just can't think why. I can't imagine why h4 would have been the move there. Sometimes computers just do recommend moves that are obviously great moves, but you can't quite work out what they're up to, what they're thinking. Knight df6, b4 is okay. I'm still up, but not the best. Interesting. I wanted to gain time against the queen and then start marching that pawn up the board. What did it want me to do? Knight back to g5, yeah. I think it likes the idea of having the knight there just because it looks like it's attacking the king, maybe. I don't know. I can't see a great deal else. It's not like it's got a future on that square. It's got no future on that square yet. I suppose it could have once this one's out of the way. But okay, b4's fine. Queen c8's best. King h2 is okay. So this is where it all started to get a bit snotty because queen to c8 is threatening this pawn. So I've got to defend it somehow. And it wanted me to defend it with the knight. So again, it's this knight g5 move. So maybe that's why it wanted me to play it in the previous move, just to defend this pawn. Maybe that's the answer. Okay, king g7. So this is already black is looking at this possibility, which happens during the game. c4 is the best move. I spent quite a while thinking about that in the stream. I wanted to start doing something with these pawns because I'm 4 against 3 on this side of the board. So I figured I could try something. Rook h8, obviously, he's got now his rook pointing directly at my king, which is pretty uncomfortable. And there were all sorts of tactics here based on the knight coming to g4 and then pawn takes and the knight moving, not there, probably moving there. And it's check from the rook, look. So, yeah, so rook h8, knight h4 is a mistake and gives away the advantage. Okay, so what should I have been playing? It says I should have been playing h4. So let's just have a look at the better move. So I did this to block the rook from getting to my king. I've then got 2 pieces in the way. But the computer's saying better to do it either with retreating the knight to g1 and defending the pawn a second time that way. That's not an unreasonable idea. I can see that one. Or h4. So pushing the pawn forward and then it's defended that way and that way. And that maintains the advantage. Okay. Okay, so knight h4 is a slight mistake. Position's still level, but it doesn't like it particularly. Knight f4 is an excellent move because I can't really play pawn takes because I've then undefended my own knight and the rook gets back into the game on that file again. So what did I do? I did take it, so that's a mistake. That's a clear mistake. And look at the analysis now. So we've gone from a position where I was definitely better to a position where black is really better. Rook takes is the best move. Well, it's pretty obvious you're going to take the knight back. Now, how did I get myself out of this pickle? Did I find the right move? Yeah, f5 was the right move. And the point of this is the rook's attacking here, the queen's attacking here. And so I did something to just cut it off. I did an interference. Even at the cost of losing a pawn, I had to cut the queen off from supporting the rook on this square. That was my thinking. So that was good. Knight h5 is good. Queen d7 is better. And this is another computer move, isn't it? Well, why? What does that do? I guess the point of that is it allows you to bring the rook across and then you've got the doubled rooks. But it's so hard to see quiet moves like Queen d7. Really, really hard to see quiet moves for human beings. So knight h5, it's perfectly okay. I mean, black's still winning. Knight g2 is the best reply yet. So I decided I would attack the rook and try and get rid of it because it's got no squares now. Look, it can't go there. It can't go there. It can't go there. And it could go there. That's the one place it could go, but then it's a bit offside, isn't it? So knight g2 is good. Knight f4 is the best answer. So I can't obviously now take the rook because it's threatening my queen. Yeah, although having said that, knight takes h4 is not a great deal worse than what actually happens, but knight takes f4 is okay. Queen takes pawn first. Now that's really clever. So instead of recapturing the knight, because the queen and the rook are now once again pointing at this square, he can leave the knight there. Because if I move the knight away, I'm not protecting this square anymore, and queen takes pawn is just going to be horrid. So he can leave the chance to take my knight for the next move. Rook c3, oh dear. So that's an error. So I brought the rook up trying to defend the pawn horizontally. And the computer's saying that queen e4 was a better bet to try and swap the queens off. But if you look, 3.87, There's not much going on here. It's pretty awful in either case. So now the question is, I've thrown away a superior position. How did my opponent manage to throw away a superior position? So rook AH8, that's like the most natural move you could possibly imagine. Like put the two rooks pointing at the king, and yeah, it's not right. It should be just queen takes knight when you've got the chance. But I just knew I couldn't help that knight, so I just left it there to its fate. And yeah, black should take it. And now queen e4 is best, and instead of being -6, we're only -3. Look, so that's not too hideous. Queen takes. Look, it's coming down. Why is it changing, by the way? Because obviously, as I play moves, the computer's able to just look ever so slightly further ahead, so it'll adjust its score. It'll adjust its analysis slightly. Rook takes, and so yeah, we've got down to this rook end game where it just took forever to play through. Where basically I'm going to end up probably struggling a bit because my two rooks are very defensive. I'm having to hold on, defend my pawns, whereas the two black rooks are attacking things. Look, this one's attacking that one's attacking that one. If the rook goes back here, they're both attacking. This one's attacking this one, whereas my rooks are sort of just defending my own pieces. So it wasn't pretty. Rook e2, yeah, I've got to do something to defend this pawn. Rook e2 or king across, I've got to do something. King there is probably better, actually, isn't it? Because the king, when the endgame, wants to head to the center anyway. But anyway, so rook c8, yep. So once again, here we go. He's got one rook attacking there, one rook attacking there. So my rooks are going to be really passive, really just be defending all the time. Not how you want to be. a4, yep. So I've got 4 here against, against 3. This one doesn't count because it's already gone past my one. So I think, well, I'll try and do something with the 4 against 3. F5, look at the analysis is now black's only a pawn ahead, says the analysis. And bear in mind, it's not a literal pawn. It's 6 versus 6, but it means that it thinks black's position is worth a pawn. It's better by a pawn. A5, no good. It was C5 as the best move here. So there's going to be a lot of inaccuracies here, I think, because the computer can just out-calculate a human being in this kind of endgame. And if you recall in the actual recording, I was completely torn on whether C5 was just the best move. So I went for A5 and king F6. So he's bringing his king towards the center. Takes isn't best, so I still should play C5. So I shouldn't have talked myself out of playing C5. But in either case, it's still not pretty, is it? So 2 pawns down. Takes, did I play it now? Fine. And now, of course, when I do finally play it, it's not the best move. Oh, it wanted me to play F3. That's interesting. So I didn't play F3 in the game. And the only reason I ruled it out was because I was worried about one rook going there, one rook going here. And suddenly this is in the way of my defense. So that was wrong. So C6 now. So what I was trying to do was hopefully push the pawn through. Clearly not the right move. So, and then a mistake there. So, wow, lots of miscalculations from me and my opponent here. So rook takes d5 is actually the best move instead of capturing at this point. So that's a mistake. That's okay. And we're just back down to being just a pawn. And now look at this. So a couple of minutes ago, I played a move 2 moves too late and it was wrong. And now our opponent has played a move too late and it turns out to be wrong. And the advantage now is less than a pawn. Takes is best, takes is best, takes is best. And here's the position that we spent many, many episodes trying to work out if I could save. And minus 0.45, it's less than half a pawn. So that makes me think it probably was savable. But now I look at all this orange down here. Oh dear. Well, let's see. I think it only highlights mistakes that are mine, by the way. I don't think it highlights mistakes by the black pieces, or so by the opponent. I think it just highlights errors by the owner of the account, if you see what I mean. So king g2, so straight away we crack on with a mistake. So why did I do it? Well, kings are supposed to be towards the center in the end games, or at least be active. So I thought, well, I'll get my king active. And straight away the computer says, no, Should have played h4, and now I'm 2 moves behind, 2 pawns behind. So brilliant, great start. H4 is interesting. I wonder why, particularly. The rook's going to come down to d2, rook check. I don't know. We don't want to spend hours doing this. More than enough. And then straight away a mistake from my opponent. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of this. Computers in endgames are just death because they can calculate so far ahead when there's so few pieces. So again, it wants the king to be activated, brought into the game, which makes sense in an endgame. And another mistake. Oh dear. So I brought the rook back mainly because I couldn't think of anything else to do. I think I quite fancied the idea of playing f3, but didn't want the rook to come and check me. So I think the idea of putting the rook was to guard this line. And actually that theme stayed all the way through. I really wanted to keep the rook on this line later in the game too. e4 makes sense. So he's going to try and create a pass pawn by swapping one of his two for my one and then pushing the spare. Rook c3, rook a2 would have been better. I think I probably looked at that at the time, just trying to keep the rook on this line. I think I played rook a3 because now we can't push the pawn because takes, and we've got a draw. King e5 then turns out to be a mistake. Okay, so it wanted the rook to come down here. So now I've vacated this line. Black should have brought their rook down and didn't. Rook a3, again, I remember doing that, thinking that it might be quite useful to be able to give some checks to the black king. Rook c5, giving checks straight away is the best move. Don't take on a computer in an endgame. So rook c6 is a mistake. Again, it still wants the black rook down here on this 7th rank. Well, it's called the 2nd, but it's the 7th for black, isn't it? It's their 7th rank. So I found one that's best. Hallelujah. Right. So let's go back one. So why did I do that? I did it because I wanted to get the rook behind the king and the pass pawns. So that's good. I finally found the best move in the endgame. And that's a good reply. And 2 best moves in a row. Blimey. Go me. So check from behind the king. King c3. Now that's got to be good news for white because the king is now completely cut off from what's going on. And that's probably why that wasn't the best move. Yeah, it says h4, and I reckon that's probably because it's quite good for me to have the black king cut off. So I can understand, I think I can understand that one. And now you see the problem, yeah, because I've let the black king get back into contact with these 2 pawns. So yeah, that was probably a mistake. And now I should have put the rook back and tried to repeat the position. I should have rechecked. And if I'd rechecked and the king had gone here, I can still play h4. Okay, so rook a8. But again, what I'm trying to do with rook a8 is start giving checks this way. Okay, fair enough. So rook c5 then is a mistake. It thinks, I wondered that in the game, if bringing the other pawn down was probably a better idea and try to use all 3 of these. So slightly let off, rook c5, rook a3 check. So my plan was obviously a rubbish plan because it says that's a mistake. And now I'm nearly 4 pawns behind, so it's a big mistake too. It still wants me to play that move h4, which is interesting. Rook c3 check, rook a6. I'm going to try and get back behind the king, but it wanted me to play rook a1. I guess then so I can come over and defend in that direction, but normally you'd want the rooks to be behind enemy pawns. So interesting. Oh, f3, there's a mistake. Oh, and that draws. That must be the move that draws the game, because look at the difference. We've gone from 3.5 pawns behind to basically level. So f3 does actually throw away the win. Wow. King g3 is best. Oh, look at this. And the computer's now analyzed it out to 0.00. Look. So all that thinking about, is this a draw, is this a draw, is this a draw? And then I tried to throw it away again. So I had the draw. I should have just gone check immediately. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah. Well, I think we get back to that position as it turns out, don't we? G5 is best. King h2, I spent ages wondering about that, and it turns out it's not very good. Again, I should have just gone back and checked the king. So my opponent's now winning again in this endgame. So let's see where he throws it away. Oh, and there's where he throws it away. E3 is a mistake. So the most natural move in the world to deflect my pawn and try and force this one through actually turns out to draw the game. Rook endgames are crazy stuff. And the computers are incredible at them. And takes, and I think, yeah, 0.00. And I think we agree a draw in a couple of moves' time, because there's now no way for our opponent to, I mean, it doesn't matter, yeah, 0.00. There's no way for our opponent to force through at all if in this position, because as soon as he comes down this way, in fact, we'll have a look. We'll just say, if you try King F1, just let it do its calculation, King G3, and I've got two pieces on this square, and I'm threatening to bring the rook across. In fact, yeah. So there's just no way that anything can happen here except all the pieces get traded off, and we have a draw. So we'll go back to the position that actually was. So I think it was f takes e3 is fine, king takes, rook a3 check, king e2, rook a2, king e3, rook a3, and that's the point at which we had a draw. As you can see, there's two halves have appeared. So that's crazy. What a wild game. Not good for me. I'm going to say 60% accuracy is yeah, that's not great. Although I think, to be fair, most of the inaccuracies were in the end game. I think probably the first half of the game was probably my usual 90 odd. It's just the end game. Look at these. Oh, so many orange and yellow moves for me in the end game. Not pretty. Not pretty. Have a look at the moments. The moments is quite good. It whizzes through until you get to something that changes. A balanced game. Okay, next key moment. Just whizzing through till something happens. Quite a lot of whizzing through. Yeah, bishop f8 is a best. So that was my best move. That's where I'm winning. So at that point, I should have managed to convert. Same, still has the advantage. All these moves are just okay. And then there's the mistake. It's back to being balanced now. It's a mistake when I played knight h4. And that's a clear mistake. So significant advantage to black now. And we can go through and see another mistake. Black is now clearly winning. Okay, so that gave me half a chance to get away with it. Inaccuracy, black's better. Critical move, there's only one good move. Retry to find it. It could do if I was doing training, but I've just sat here and looked at the analysis, so I don't really need to do that. We know it's okay. We're getting a mistake. There's going to be quite a few of these now, I think. Yep, it's going to stop for a mistake every couple of moves, I think. And there's another mistake. There's, oh dear, whoops. And then we've got, I think, the draw. I think it just goes, yeah, balanced game. Yeah, it's just going to say, yeah, okay, well. So that was quite something. Yeah. And what's it looking at? Pass pawns and double rooks as the training. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. Well, we've got away with one. It was a fascinating game. Yeah, I was winning at one point and then I was losing. I suppose when you look at it like that, a draw is a fair result. So what can I say? The opponent here was 1500 approximately when we were playing, but with that's on their daily chess. Their actual rapid play rating, I think, have been around the 2100 mark. So that's obviously a much stronger player than 1500. So in the end, it's not a bad result. But yeah, a lot of endgame mistakes there, hence the low accuracy score. All right, see you all next time. Cheers.